The polished floors gleamed under artificial light, a far cry from the dusty soil Thomas Wilson once worked. His footsteps echoed as he entered the auction house, quiet, steady, and out of place. The suits turned, briefly glancing at the man in faded overalls and cracked boots. Then they looked away. He wasn't worth their time. No one offered him a seat. No one welcomed him. He wasn't here for champagne or million-dollar deals. He was here because the land meant something to him. Not numbers on paper, not a property, something living, something sacred. He stood at the back, took out a weathered leather notebook. Inside were hand-drawn maps, notes, signatures from a time when the land was protected. He wasn't trying to stop the sale. He was trying to stop a mistake. At the front, Maxwell Reed adjusted his tie. Tall, polished, the type who never touched dirt unless it was in a golf bunker. He smiled at the crowd, developers, investors, out-of-town money. "Today," he said, voice booming, "you have a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The Green Valley Estate, 320 acres, prime development land. Let's open the bidding at $3 million. Paddles raised, hands moved like clockwork. 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. Thomas raised his hand, not with a bid, but with a warning. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rough but clear. "That land has a covenant from 1982. It protects the southeastern section. No development. It preserves the watershed." The room went still for half a beat, then a few low chuckles. Reed froze, then slowly stepped away from the podium, smiling like he was entertaining a child. "We've had all properties vetted," he said. "Our legal team cleared everything. Please, sir, don't disrupt the event." "I'm not disrupting," Thomas replied calmly. "I helped write that covenant with the Green family, filed and recorded with the county. It protects 5 farms downstream." Reed's smile thinned. "Sir, unless you're here to bid, we'll have to ask you to remain quiet. This is a serious auction for serious buyers." "I'm being serious," Thomas said, still holding his notebook. "Buyers deserve to know." Reed stepped forward. "This is a premium land event. We don't need broke old farmers with empty pockets wasting our time." The silence was sharp. It cut through the room harder than his words. No one laughed. No one stood up. Thomas didn't flinch. He closed the notebook gently. His eyes, the kind that had seen droughts, deaths, and dreams, didn't blink. He turned, ready to leave with dignity still intact. 2 men in black approached. Security, one on each side. Thomas didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just walked toward the door. But before he crossed it, he looked back, not at Reed, not at the crowd, but at the land projected behind them on a screen. "The land remembers," he said quietly, "even when people forget." Reed cleared his throat. "My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Let's continue with Parcel 4. Outside, Thomas stood beside his old truck. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the door handle. Not from fear, not from shame, from holding back everything he could have said. He took one last look at the auction house. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady. "It's Dad. I'm fine. But there's something going on at the auction you need to know about." Thomas sat behind the wheel of his pickup, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him steady. His knuckles were pale, skin lined and calloused from decades of work. The truck didn't start. He hadn't even turned the key. For a moment, he just stared out the windshield, eyes glazed over, lost in silence. The humiliation was still fresh, sitting heavy in his chest. The words echoed, "Broke old farmer." The crowd's silence cut worse than Reed's insult. He reached up and pulled down the visor. Tucked behind it was a photo, faded from years of sun and dust. His younger self stood beside a woman with kind eyes and a little girl in pigtails. Behind them, a pond glistened under the sun. Green Valley, their land, before it was lost, before the world forgot who they were. Thomas looked down at his phone, hesitated, then dialed. It rang twice. "Dad?" Her voice was sharp, concerned. Everything okay? I didn't want to bother you, he said, his voice rough. I know you're busy. Dad, what's wrong? I'm fine, he said slowly, but they're about to sell land they shouldn't be touching. Where are you? At the Clearwater auction. They're selling Green Valley. Reed's running the show. He paused, swallowed hard. I tried to tell them about the watershed covenant, the one from '82. You remember? I still have the original papers. What happened? They kicked me out. He let out a dry breath. Didn't want me interrupting their champagne bidding war. She was quiet for a beat. Are you okay? I am, he said. Just didn't expect it to feel like this. There was a click on her end, papers moving, a chair being pushed back. I'll take care of it, she said. You did the right thing. Send me a photo of the documents. I'll get the records office on it right now. I already did, he replied. Just didn't feel right leaving it alone. You don't have to. Not anymore. Inside the auction house, Maxwell Reed returned to the podium, wiping his hands like dust had gotten on him. He cracked a smile at the crowd. My apologies for that interruption. Some folks struggle to accept that land belongs to those who can afford it. Now, shall we continue? A few polite laughs. He looked down at his notes. Parcel 4. Prime land, untouched and ripe for development. Exactly what the big firms wanted. His voice rang out again, confident, in control. We'll begin Parcel 4 at 1.8 million. Can I get 1.8? Hands rose. 1.85. Another paddle. 2 million. Reed smiled to himself. Outside, Thomas watched through the windshield as luxury SUVs pulled into the parking lot. More investors, more outsiders. He didn't see the last car in the next row. A sleek black vehicle, dark windows, unmarked plates. Inside it, Sarah Mitchell was already dialing. Attorney General, she said, I need your full team at Clearwater County Auction House. I'm on my way inside. Reed never saw her walk through the doors. Not yet. He was too busy counting numbers, too distracted by the game he thought he'd already won. He had no idea that the clock had started ticking the moment Thomas hung up that call. 20 minutes. That's all he had left. 20 minutes before his kingdom of silence and selective disclosure would come crashing down. And the man he called worthless was the reason the most powerful woman in the state was about to step into his world and burn it to the ground. Engines rumbled like thunder as the auction house windows shook. The soft hum of champagne talk inside came to a sudden pause. Outside, a black SUV rolled to a stop, then another, then 4 more. The parking lot was full of expensive sedans and trucks. But these vehicles were different. Government plates, state troopers on motorcycles flanking them, lights spinning red and blue in silence. Inside, heads turned. Maxwell Reed paused mid-sentence as the last SUV door opened, and a woman stepped out in a tailored navy suit. Silver streaks ran through her dark hair, pulled neatly into a bun. Calm, composed, radiating power with every step. It took only 3 seconds for someone near the front to whisper loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Is that the governor? The room stirred. Reed tried to play it cool, raising his hand to regain attention. Ladies and gentlemen, let's stay focused. These are likely unrelated state matters. But he knew. The tightness in his jaw betrayed him. The auction house doors opened. 2 state troopers entered first, eyes scanning the room like a silent warning. Behind them came Governor Sarah Mitchell, her Attorney General and Chief of Staff flanking her. Not a word had been spoken, but every soul in the room felt the shift in air. Sarah walked straight past the investors, past the podium, past the banner that read, Premium Properties for Premium Clients. Then she turned. Her voice didn't need volume to command silence. Before another acre is sold, we need to talk about what's been hidden from this room. Reed opened his mouth, then closed it again. His lips moved, but no words came. He finally stepped down from the podium, trying to regain footing like a man suddenly standing on water. Governor Mitchell, what an unexpected honor. We weren't made aware of any official visit. I imagine you weren't, she said calmly. But here I am. I assume your office received a misunderstanding, Reed said, forcing a smile. All titles have been legally cleared. Perhaps we can discuss this privately. There's nothing private about auctioning off land that carries a binding covenant from 1982, she interrupted, especially when the buyers haven't been told. The Attorney General opened a leather folder and held it up. We have certified copies from county records confirming the Watershed Protection Covenant still exists and is active on parcels 2, 3, and 7. It prohibits non-agricultural development and mandates preservation of the southeastern wetlands. Murmurs exploded around the room. Investors looked at one another. Some pulled out their phones. One man stood up and walked to the side of the hall, dialing his attorney. Reed turned pale. Governor, I assure you, our legal team has done everything by the book. We've never knowingly... If your legal team missed this, that's negligence. If they knew and didn't disclose it, that's fraud. The room froze. Silence heavier than stone. Sarah turned toward the crowd, her voice even. I'm placing a hold on this auction until a full review is conducted. All titles, disclosures, and communications will be examined by my office and the state's legal department. Reed's voice cracked. You can't just shut down a private business. Yes, I can, she replied. Two state troopers flanked the podium as the Attorney General stepped forward to speak with the auction house staff. Sarah looked directly at Reed. My father warned you. You had him removed. Reed blinked. Your father? Yes, Thomas Wilson, the worn-out farmer with empty pockets you mocked and escorted out. He served on the county water board for 22 years. He helped draft the very covenant you tried to bury. Reed looked like the floor had just fallen out from under him. The investors no longer looked impressed. They looked furious, betrayed, like they'd been invited into a deal built on a lie. Reed stepped back, trying to explain, but no one was listening anymore. Sarah scanned the crowd, meeting each pair of eyes one by one. This isn't about politics. It's about the truth, and about protecting the land that built this community. Anyone who buys here deserves the full picture. And from this point forward, that's exactly what they'll get. Outside, more vehicles were arriving. News vans, reporters. Inside, Reed stood silent in a room that no longer respected him. His empire wasn't just under review. It had just been cracked open by the very man he'd called irrelevant. And his daughter had just burned his whole facade to the ground, in front of everyone who mattered. The Attorney General stepped forward, silent but commanding, holding a thick folder in his hands. He opened it slowly, deliberately, like he already knew the weight it carried. These are certified documents from the Clearwater County Records Office, he said. Filed in 1982, signed by Judge Harrison, co-authored by Thomas Wilson during his time on the County Water Board. He laid a copy on the podium. The covenant outlines clear legal restrictions: no non-agricultural development, mandatory preservation of the southeastern wetlands, protection of water flow to 5 downstream farms, still active, still binding. The entire room went still. No whispers now. Just the hum of investors realizing they might have been sold a lie. Governor Mitchell looked around at the crowd, then back at Reed. These were not hidden documents. They were public record. If your team missed them, that's a legal failure. If your team ignored them, that's something far worse. Reed's mouth twitched. Governor, with all due respect, our disclosures followed standard real estate practices. If the county's outdated filing system, outdated doesn't mean non-existent, she cut in. We've pulled records from 3 counties where your auctions took place in the last 5 years. And in 14 separate transactions, environmental restrictions or heritage site protections were either left out or buried in unreadable fine print. The Attorney General stepped closer to Reed. That's not standard practice. That's manipulation. That's grounds for a full investigation. Reed's voice was tight now, the polish peeling off. You don't understand how complicated these sales can be. No one in this room is confused about complication, Governor Mitchell said, but they are confused why a covenant signed 40 years ago still on record, wasn't disclosed before this auction began. An investor in the front row stood up, face red. We've already submitted bids. If this covenant is valid, we were bidding on unusable land. You were bidding on a lie, the Attorney General replied. Sarah didn't flinch. She looked directly at Reed. You removed a man for trying to tell the truth. You had him escorted out, publicly, disrespected, humiliated. Someone in the back whispered, just loud enough. Wait, that old farmer was her father? The room turned to her in stunned silence. Sarah didn't blink. Yes, the man you threw out like trash is Thomas Wilson, my father. Reed's entire body stilled. The color drained from his face. The same crowd he had dazzled with charm and luxury now looked at him like a fraud, a hustler in a tailored suit. Sarah took one step closer, voice steady as stone. He served on the water board for over 2 decades. He helped protect this valley when people like you were still flipping starter homes. He knew that covenant like scripture, and he tried to warn you. You didn't just dismiss him, Mr. Reed. You disrespected this entire community. Behind her, the Attorney General gave a slight nod to the troopers. Reed Auctions is now under temporary suspension, pending full review. All records from the last 5 years are being seized for investigation. Reed stepped back, almost stumbling. You can't do this. You don't understand the consequences. The consequences are exactly what I'm here to address, Sarah replied. Because when you build your business on lies and erase the voices of people who know this land better than any spreadsheet, you create something toxic. She turned back to the room. And we're done pretending that's acceptable. The investors began gathering their things, whispering into phones, stepping away from the tables as if the room itself had become contaminated. The illusion of prestige was gone. All that remained was a man exposed. Reed stood frozen as 2 state officials approached his staff at the back table. Paperwork was boxed up, laptops taken. One of his assistants started to cry. Sarah glanced toward the entrance, where her father now stood quiet, reserved, still holding that same leather notebook. She looked back at Reed. If you had just listened, this never would have happened. He had nothing to say. For the first time, Maxwell Reed was completely silent. And outside, the cameras were already rolling. The room wasn't built for comfort. Fluorescent lights, stiff chairs, and no applause. No bidding paddles, no fancy suits admiring his presentation. Ew, just state seals on the wall, stern faces across the table, and a thick file with his name on it. Maxwell Reed sat with his back stiff and his hands folded tightly in front of him. Across the table, officials from the Department of Agriculture, the Real Estate Commission, and the Attorney General's office flipped through documents silently. 3 days had passed since the auction crumbled, and now, so was everything else. Mr. Reed, the Attorney General said, our review of your past land auctions has uncovered concerning patterns. He didn't respond. There was no point in pretending now. Of the last 27 agricultural properties sold by Reed Auctions, 14 appear to have included covenants, environmental restrictions, or legal limitations that were either not disclosed or poorly documented in sales materials. 14 out of 27, more than half. The words landed like lead weights. These were not minor technicalities. These were violations of state real estate disclosure laws. Buyers made million-dollar decisions without knowing the truth. Reed swallowed, the inside of his mouth dry like sand. Some of those were oversights, he said. The filing systems in rural counties are not an excuse, the real estate commissioner cut in. You market yourself as a premium provider for high-end investors. That means full responsibility, not selective transparency. He shifted in his chair. Nothing was done maliciously. And yet it happened repeatedly, the Department of Agriculture representative said. We've had complaints from corporate buyers, independent farmers, and environmental groups. Your firm prioritized sales volume over legal accuracy. That's not business. That's risk. Reed leaned forward. I never falsified anything. I built that business from nothing. I've worked hard to make those auctions successful. At what cost? The Attorney General asked calmly. You removed a man who tried to speak the truth. You dismissed a legal covenant because you thought no one would check. He looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Your license is now under formal review, Mr. Reed, effective immediately. All active listings are frozen, and your upcoming sales events are canceled until further notice. Reed said nothing. We'll give you the opportunity to respond in writing, the commissioner added, but I'd suggest consulting legal counsel. Carefully, the meeting adjourned without ceremony. No one shook his hand. No one wished him luck. He walked out of the room a little slower than he walked in. Outside, his phone buzzed. Messages from clients. One, we're postponing our bid until further notice. Another, pulling out of the Marshall Ridge deal. Too much exposure. One after the other, the same theme. We're out. We don't trust you. By the time he reached his car, his inbox had 9 cancellations. By that evening, 16. His empire wasn't collapsing in flames. It was quietly walking away from him. Later that night, Reed sat alone in his office. The place that once pulsed with ambition now felt hollow. The lights too bright, the silence too sharp. He looked out the window at the dark valley beyond. For the first time in his life, he didn't see the land as numbers. Not price per acre, not resale potential, not zoning flexibility. He saw the lines of the hills, the way the trees curved toward the water. He thought about Thomas Wilson, about how he stood in a room full of people who wouldn't listen and still spoke the truth, and about how he'd carried that notebook like it was a weapon made of paper and memory. Reed leaned back in his chair, took a long breath and whispered to no one, "What if we've been doing it all wrong?" The knock was soft, almost hesitant. Reed looked up from his desk expecting another lawyer, another reporter, another investor trying to salvage their name. But when the door opened, it wasn't any of those. It was Thomas Wilson, worn overalls, weathered notebook still in hand. Same calm eyes. Reed stood, unsure what to say. "I didn't think I'd see you again." "I figured you wouldn't," Thomas said quietly. "But we've got something to talk about. No lawyers, no reporters, no tension. Just 2 men, one who had sold land for a living and one who had lived it." Reed motioned toward the seat across from him. Thomas sat slowly, placed the notebook on the desk between them. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what happened, about the land, about what comes next." Reed leaned forward, cautious. "You coming to rub it in?" Thomas shook his head. "I didn't come to fight. I came with an offer." Reed raised an eyebrow. "I don't think I've got much left to offer right now." "You've got something," Thomas replied. "You understand markets. You've got reach, connections. You know how to move land, but you've been doing it all wrong." Reed didn't argue. He couldn't. "And you?" he asked. "I've walked those fields for 50 years. I know where the land floods, where it breathes, where the water runs clean. Things no map or drone can tell you." Reed was silent, listening. "What if," Thomas continued, "we stopped pretending that the land is just a transaction? What if we sold it with the story still inside it, with the wisdom still attached?" Reed blinked. "You're suggesting what? We include your notebook with the property deed?" "I'm suggesting a new model," Thomas said. "You bring the buyers. I bring the truth. Not to stop development, but to shape it. Right. Sustainable. Honest." Reed leaned back, thinking. "We'd have to change everything." "Then change it," Thomas said, "or watch it all fall apart." Reed tapped the desk, eyes fixed on the old man across from him. "You really think buyers will care about where the spring rises or how the soil shifts after rain?" "The smart ones will," Thomas said, "because the dumb ones are already paying the price. Flooded basements, failed crops, lawsuits. This valley's got history and memory." Reed stood up, walked to the window. The valley lay quiet outside. For the first time, he saw it not as parcels and profit, but as a living thing, a system of breath and roots and time. "You're serious about this?" I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. And if I say yes, what would we even call it? Thomas smiled slightly. Not sure yet, but it starts with respect for the land, for the people who kept it alive long before GPS or zoning laws. Reed turned, walked back to his desk, and sat down. You realize how crazy this sounds, right? Thomas opened his notebook and slid it across the table. Maybe, he said, but crazy didn't stop you from building your empire. Maybe now it's time to build something that lasts longer. Reed looked down at the notebook. Handwritten maps, crop rotations, water flow patterns. Notes about hawks nesting in the east field. Generations of memory, bound in leather and faded ink. This could change everything, he said quietly. It should, Thomas replied. They shook hands. No contract, no cameras. Just two men, finally listening to the same language of the land. The sun poured gently across the fields, washing the land in gold. Where luxury homes were once planned, rows of heritage crops now swayed with the breeze. Wooden signs marked each section: heirloom tomatoes, cover crops, pollinator gardens. The land wasn't just preserved. It had been reborn. At the center of the old Green Valley estate stood a restored red barn, now the heart of the Riverside Agricultural Heritage Center. It buzzed with students, researchers, and farmers, some old, some just starting, all gathered to honor the land and the man who had once been thrown out trying to protect it. 5 years had passed since the day Thomas Wilson was escorted from the auction like he didn't belong. Today, his name was etched into stone. The ceremony was simple, the way Thomas would have wanted. A few folding chairs under an oak tree, community members in jeans and work shirts. Some of them still remembered the way he spoke, the way he listened more than he talked. Reed stood quietly in the back, no longer the center of attention. He didn't need to be. His company had changed. His name had changed, not officially, but publicly. No one in the industry said Reed Auctions anymore. They said the Wilson-Reed Protocol, a new standard. Every agricultural sale now came with environmental assessments, generational knowledge, full disclosure not just by law but by principle. What started as damage control had become the industry benchmark. Reed touched the inside of his coat pocket. The leather notebook still came with him everywhere, worn at the corners, some pages now protected in plastic sleeves, others still smudged with old ink and fingerprints. He walked toward the podium after the final speaker stepped down. Nobody clapped when he approached. They just watched. He adjusted the mic once, then looked at the notebook in his hand. I never planned to be here, he began softly. Not like this. But then again, Thomas Wilson never planned to change a system. He just wanted to protect water for the farms downstream. A breeze moved through the trees. Someone in the back nodded. He wasn't rich, wasn't loud, but when he spoke, the land listened. And now, so do we. Reed looked out at the fields. We sell land differently now. We treat it differently, because Thomas showed us that it was never about how much an acre was worth. It was about who would walk it after us. He stepped back, not wanting to say more than necessary. People didn't need speeches anymore. They had proof in the dirt under their boots. Later, as the sun dropped lower and the crowd moved toward the food tables and shaded benches, Reed slipped away. He walked toward the edge of the property, the southeastern corner, the section Thomas fought for, where the Covenant had lived in silence for decades. He stood near a wooden bench facing the pond. Oh, the notebook felt heavier in his hand now, not with weight, but meaning. He opened it slowly. One page held a sketch, rough lines, not perfect, of this very view. Water, trees, sky. A note underneath in Thomas' handwriting. The land remembers. Reed exhaled. He looked up at the open fields, at the distant barn, at families walking with baskets of produce, at young farmers taking notes beside older ones, and then back down at the worn leather in his hand. He ran a finger over the cracked cover and whispered, "The land remembers. And thanks to you, so do we." A single bird broke the quiet, cutting across the sky like a promise. Somewhere nearby, a child asked a question about soil. Someone else laughed softly, and a breeze moved through the tall grass like the valley was breathing. Reed turned to leave, but before he did, he placed the notebook gently on the bench. Let it rest. It had done its job. And the land, it would carry the memory forward now.